It is another gorgeous day in Berlin. We've honestly gotten so lucky with the most beautiful weather this trip. And I've really been enjoying the city by walking to a lot of these gallery spaces, even if they are a bit far apart from one another, because I get to really feel the vibe of the city and see a lot of these really beautiful landmarks. So the first stop of the day is going to be to Galerie Sprüth to see an exhibit by Sterling Ruby. And if you're not familiar with Sterling Ruby, he is an American artist who's known for creating a really wide variety of works, from sculpture to textile to painting. And we're going to see a little bit of all of that in this exhibit. Overall, the show revolves around the high-level themes of the domestic and craft. And this was inspired by Ruby's childhood in rural America. One of my favorite things about this exhibit is how the excitement builds. The paintings in this first room are slightly more demure in terms of size, as well as the amount of color and texture present. And these are a part of Ruby's window series that he started around 2018. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And the paintings resemble windows in the way that the canvas is divided up, so literally into planes, and it can be thought to represent the process of observing the world as well as observing oneself by emotionally looking inwards within the safe confines of the home. And in this room, you cannot miss these really large textile works that are very reminiscent of patchwork quilts. And you can see the same type of window-like pattern repeating in these works as well. And where Ruby grew up in rural Pennsylvania or Amish country, if you're more familiar with the landscape of the US, quilting and crafts like woodworking are super common, and working with textiles is something that Ruby's been doing since childhood. In the center of the room, we have these ceramic works, or, quote, basin theology. And the objects in the basins are from previous experimental projects of Ruby's that have accidentally exploded in the kiln or just gone wrong. And it's kind of a really lovely message that he's sending. He's saying that failure is not only a part of life, but a necessary part of the creative process. We're now heading over to a gallery that has one of the most unique locations of any gallery I've ever been to in any city in the world. König's gallery space is in an old Brutalist church that was once called St. Agnes. And this is an exhibit by Xenia Hausner, who is an Austrian artist. And the show consists of 12 paintings that all explore the concept of beauty. In fact, the show is titled Unintended Beauty. Hausner was inspired by an Austrian poet who said, quote, "For beauty is nothing but the start of tear, which we are barely able to endure, and it amazes us so because it serenely disdains to destroy us." So in these works, Hausner explores the idea of true beauty being downright terrifying, like in the stories of humans interacting with angels, and how there can really be this fine line between beauty and dread. In fact, it's important to Hausner to convey this sort of utopian version of beauty where women are exuding power instead of conventional beauty that's depicted in the media. These works were created with acrylics and oils on aluminum sheets. It's also worth noting that König Galerie has a really great library on the ground floor, so don't miss that. We're now heading to Galerie Nordenhake, and this is a space that I've actually been to in Mexico City. So they've got a space here in Berlin and Mexico City, and I think somewhere else. I will link that video above and below if you haven't seen it already. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous space, and of course this one is as well. This is an exhibit by John Zurier, who is another American artist, and he is known for creating these minimal monochromatic paintings. And the works in this exhibit are inspired by traditional Chinese and Japanese painting. And the exhibit's title, which is Level Distance, comes from an 11th century Northern Song Dynasty painter's poem, which describes, quote, 3 compositional formulas for achieving atmosphere and spaciousness in paintings. So the works in this exhibit are Zurier's interpretation of level distance, which he says, it, quote, meant to suggest breadth, balance, tranquility, and expansion, all qualities that are important to my painting. And Zurier is also inspired by his experiences in California and Iceland, quote, seeing movement and stillness, closeness and distance, and the sound of the wind and the light and air of an empty room. The next stop is to Galerie Capitain, Petzel, to see an exhibit of works by Sanya Kantarovsky. And this is a really great example of Soviet-era modernist architecture, probably our first example in this video. And Kantarovsky plays on the Western idea of being centered, or having a place to, quote, come back to when life's challenges and emotions push you off balance. So the subjects in each of the paintings all appear to have no center, to be able to get back to a place of balance. And this really speaks to the current unbalance that the artist feels due to the tragic events currently transpiring after Russia invaded Ukraine. This was especially personal because of the fact that they were born in Russia and they really stand in solidarity with Ukraine. And Kantarovsky said in a recent conversation, quote, "A friend reminded me of a quote by Philip Guston. When the 1960s came along, I was feeling split, schizophrenic. The war, what was happening in America, the brutality of the world. What kind of man am I, sitting at home, reading magazines, going into a frustrated fury about everything, and then going to my studio to adjust a red to a blue? I found myself in a similar state. While acknowledging the inevitable dimension of painting is simply, quote, adjusting materials, I was still left with it as my primary way of processing. As I worked on finishing the paintings in the studio, I made 3 more, titled Return, Completely Blind, Red Wall, and Growth." We're now at our final gallery of the day, which is Perez Projects, to see 2 exhibits. And the first exhibit is by Stanislava Kovalcikova. And the exhibit is titled, Am I Dead Yet? And all of the works in this exhibit are, quote, centered around paintings which harness powerful female energy in the absence of men. And you can see this absence of men in the shoes that are on the window right when you come into the exhibit, as well as cigarette butts that are strewn against the walls. The second exhibit at Perez Projects is by Shuang titled Nobody's Home. And so this is kind of a crazy story. So back in 2020, Lee came to Berlin for an exhibit that she was having with Perez Projects at the time. And COVID hit, and she wasn't able to go back to China since then, so 2 years. So this exhibit is all about her struggle and restlessness that came from being stuck in Berlin for those 2 years, and the quote, ideals of home and belonging. So in her digital works, she's depicting the concept of having to create intimacy over screens, which is unfortunately something a lot of us are familiar with during the pandemic and even now working from home more than ever. These wall pieces, which are my personal favorite, are inspired by Lee's childhood, where she frequently immersed herself in the world of anime. So she must have been feeling particularly nostalgic, being separated from home and thinking about her childhood. And then the shell-like sculptures, which are in the center of the exhibit, are representative of how sea creatures can take their homes with them wherever they go, and they always have this protection. And that's it. I really hope that you enjoyed this time in Berlin. This will certainly not be my last visit to Europe for the year, knock on wood. So if you enjoyed this video, then think about subscribing and you will see more in the future. And I will see you all in the next one.